Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to start out with two athletes. The first one is Bobby Williams, who died recently at the age of 86. He was the quarterback for the undefeated national championship 1949 Notre Dame team. He was an All-American for Coach Frank Leahy, and he played with such immortals as Leon Hart and Emil Sitko, and he still holds the Notre Dame single-game passing completion record, 13-16 against Michigan State that year. Here's Baltimore Television on Bobby Williams.
Unfortunate news for Notre Dame football fans. Former quarterback Bob Williams has passed away. A two-time All-American, Williams led the Irish to an undefeated season and a national championship in 1949. He was inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1988. Bob Williams was 86 years old.
One of their key games that year was against their key rival Southern Cal, and they shut them out 32-0. And here's a little bit of Bobby Williams' heroics in that game.
Near the end of the first quarter, Bob Williams goes back to pass. It's complete, out in the left flat to Spaniel for a short gain. On the next play, with the ball on the 40-yard line, Williams drops back to pass again. There it goes. On the 15, co-captain Leon Hart takes it, wards off a Southern California tackler, and goes over for the first score of the game. Notre Dame leads 7-0. In the fourth quarter, Williams passes from his own 36. Bill Barrett takes it at the Trojan 40, and they pile him up on the 26. In slow motion, it's Notre Dame's great offensive powerhouse in action. Zaleski cracks the line for 9 yards, down to the 6. On the play to the left, Williams hands it off to Barrett, and this flashy sophomore back is down inches short of the score. On a power play, Barrett racks up the final touchdown of the game as Notre Dame wins 32-0 and stretches their winning streak to 37 games without defeat. They now prepare to meet Southern Methodist on December 3rd to finish a great season.
Well, we're going to move on to our other athlete, Philadelphia Flyer forward Rick Mcleach, who died recently at the age of 66. Flyers lost owner Ed Snyder recently. We did his podcast, and now they've lost one of their legendary forwards from the Broad Street Bullies of the mid-70s. Here's Philadelphia Television on Rick Mcleach.
Flyers family, as we turn to the orange and black, is in mourning today. As one of the best players in team history, Rick Mcleish passed away last night at the age of 66. The three-time All-Star was a cornerstone of the Flyers teams that won back-to-back Stanley Cups in 1974 and 1975. No player in team history has more playoff goals than Rick Mcleich's 53. Here are some statements from his former Flyers teammates. Bob Clark saying, quote, "Ricky was the most talented player the Flyers had during the 1970s. Life after hockey wasn't fair to Ricky. He left us far too soon." And this quote from Bill Barber: "Ricky was a special player for the Flyers. He always came up with scoring the big goals, and he was instrumental helping us win 2 Stanley Cups. He will be greatly missed."
Well, his most famous goal was the goal that won the 1974 Stanley Cup. In Game 6, he scored the only goal against the Boston Bruins.
Up to the left of Gilbert. Same people on the ice. Mcleish against Shaffer. Mcleish controls to DuPont. DuPont throws it and scores! Mcleish touchdown. He got his second goal of this series, and he lengthens his lead in the playoffs. And the Flyers have been winning all those big face-offs. The shot looked like a big one. The shot looked like it bounced, but I believe it was Mcleish who tipped it, and that changed the direction. We'll see it again. Deflecting it to the inside, off the heel of his stick. You'll see it here as he goes across the ice, and he deflects it off the heel of his stick, changing the direction of it. Gilbert didn't have a chance as he was right in front of him. Here's DuPont's shot. Mcleish moving across, and the puck changes direction. That's the 6th shot that they had, Philadelphia's had in this game. Boston have had 14 shots. And Mcleish got that big face-off, as Ted Lindsay pointed out. And so a little justice there that he got the goal. His 13th playoff goal from DuPont at 14:48. A power play goal with O'Reilly off at the time.
Well, we're going to move on now to Air Force Colonel Thomas Schaefer, who died recently at the age of 85. He was the senior U.S. officer who was captured by the Iranians during the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979 and 1980. 52 Americans, led by Colonel Schaefer, were captured by the fundamentalist Iranian government and held for 444 days until they were released the day of Ronald Reagan's inauguration. Here's a report on the hostage crisis.
In late 1979 and 1980, The Iranian hostage crisis cast a shadow over all other events on the American scene. More than 50 Americans were held hostage by Islamic revolutionaries who violently objected to American influence and power in their country. In March of 1979, a popular revolution led by Islamic holy leaders had toppled the Shah of Iran, a wealthy dictator whom the CIA had helped to install in the 1950s under President Eisenhower. The Shah promoted Western values and Western capitalism, and despite his dismal record on human rights, the United States continued to support him. In the geopolitical strategy of the Cold War, Iran had been a key ally in the Middle East.
We continue to hold the government of Iran responsible for the safety and for the early release of the American hostages who have been held so long.
As the months passed, public opinion of President Jimmy Carter declined.
I am very angry that the president of our country would do something so stupid.
It was my decision.
For many Americans, the long ordeal was a reflection of the loss of American power after the Vietnam War.
Starting this Christmas again, second anniversary that we spent apart.
The hostages had spent more than a year in captivity when Carter finally succeeded in negotiating their freedom.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear that I will...
But the release came too late to rescue him from defeat by the Republican candidate, Ronald Reagan, in the presidential election of 1980. The first plane carrying the freed hostages lifted off from the airport in Iran a scant half-hour after Reagan was inaugurated.
The planes bearing our prisoners left Iranian airspace and are now free.
Here's Colonel Schaefer at an Air Force conference discussing his time in solitary confinement in Iran.
The jubilation shown in these press photographs was occasioned by the release of the 52 American hostages from Iran. Preceding that happy occasion, the 52 underwent over 14 months of anxiety, uncertainty, and fears as their day-to-day existence and fates were manipulated by the Iranians. Here to describe some of the events from those months is Air Force Colonel Thomas E. Schaefer, the senior-ranking military hostage who was performing duty as defense attaché at the time of the takeover.
Colonel Schaefer, were you placed in solitary confinement during the period of your captivity? And if so, could you explain to us how you cope with that period of solitary confinement?
Okay, yes, I was placed in solitary confinement for about 3.5 months. And that isn't as bad as it sounds if you can maintain self-discipline. I would keep myself busy every awakening hour that I had. What you can do if you do not have reading materials, books or your Bible or magazines, you can make up games. Now, it just happened when one period that I was in solitaire was during the Olympics. So I produced my own Olympic Games. That didn't amount to much, but I was able to have 3 or 4 games, and I had competition, and this took up a lot of time. Remember in one room when I had nothing, no book, no mattress pad or anything, just a bare floor, I made up some round balls from toilet paper and took some thread off my clothes and made up a little game where I could roll the balls up against the wall. And this really shook up the guards. They said, look at that girl down there on the floor, you know. That, to me, it was humorous, you know. But it did take up time, keeping score. Another thing is when I was walking my 6 miles a day, some rooms 160 laps per mile, I would fantasize or go through an actual hike that I took with my kids, say, at Yosemite. And I was finding that my hikes during captivity were longer than the actual hikes I took because you stop at every rock and flower and bend, and it just took that much longer. You may want to build a boat, fantasy, but just go through every step of drawing up blueprints. Or, if you have any musical ability, you can sing or whistle, hum. I had 4 groups of songs that I would sing. Many of the times I was told to shut up or keep quiet, you're singing too loud, but I would keep up the singing, maybe at a lower level. Trying to remember words to songs is good. It's a good mental exercise. So the main thing was trying to keep myself busy for the entire time. and you can do it.
Well, we're going to close tonight with Peter Shaffer, British playwright who died at the age of 90, best known for writing Equus and Amadeus. Here is Julian Walker of the BBC4 Last Word on Peter Shaffer.
The giant of post-war British theatre. Sir Peter Shaffer is perhaps best known for three plays, The Royal Hunt of the Sun, Equus and Amadeus, but he wrote extensively over a period of 40 years. He was born in Liverpool 5 minutes after his twin brother Anthony, who also became a writer. In the early 1950s, he had his first taste of New York, and that was a city he was to make his home for the rest of his life. I've been talking to the director, Sir Richard Eyre, and to the London theatre critic of the International New York Times, Matt Wolfe, about Sir Peter's contribution to the theatre.
They were big, ripe, capital T theatrical plays.
He was up there with Hal Pinter and Tom Stoppard, John Osborne, Arnold Westcott.
He didn't change the theatrical landscape the way that Pinter did, and he didn't have sort of the sheer brainiac dimensions that Tom Stoppard still has. But in terms of taking subjects that you might think wouldn't work on stage, that would not be appropriate for the stage, that somehow wouldn't translate to the stage, Peter Shaffer ignored all that.
I wanted to write plays involving total theatre, but by that I mean theatre that is, of course, a text, but fulfilled by gesture and ritual and magic.
He also liked to give, and this is true of Royal Hunt of the Sun, Equus and Amadeus, to think of actors in binary opposition. So each of his three defining plays has two robust male roles.
I feel very often that the playwright is almost impelled to ignite his play by finding another set of cherished attitudes and beliefs in another character. Not just Mr. Right or Mr. Wrong, but two different Mr. Rights. And this fascinates me.
Shaffer, it must be said, did have a great love of rhetoric, but it was rhetoric allied to the body. And interestingly, bodies were very important in his plays, particularly in Equus. And Richard Burton came out on stage at the very beginning and said, with one particular horse called Nugget, he embraces. And there was something about Burton's extraordinary voice ricocheting around the four walls of that Broadway theater. It wasn't that Burton was performing Herculean feats in the manner of Royal Hunt of the Sun, but that it was just so rhetorically grand.
I can't jump because the bit forbids it, and my own basic force, my horsepower, if you like, is too little.
One of the jokes that I frivolously made about Equus was because it was an enormous success, Equus, in America also. And I said that it was a very scandalous event in England because it was cruel to horses, and in America because it was cruel to psychiatrists.
Then we come to the relationship between Mozart and Salieri in Amadeus.
It was really the production that made Ian McKellen's name in the United States.
First bassoon, tenor, trombone, what? With the tenors.
The criticism about Schaffer that throughout his writing he sort of rewrote the same dynamic. Usually younger man, older man. But the difference with Amadeus was that it wasn't about illness and psychosis. It was about mediocrity and genius. I think he liked actually being written about. I think he liked being the focus of attention because, being somebody profligate himself with words, he thought it was quite nice if some of these words might be about him. He could articulate what he did very well. I think there was a point beyond which he didn't particularly want to go. For instance, I'm not entirely sure how much he really wanted to talk about what was going on with these binary male oppositions in all of these plays, what exactly that was about.
He was a very, very successful man, a very thoughtful man, and a man who got huge amount of pleasure out of working in the theatre.
One of the interesting things I think about his legacy, probably more so than Pinter or Stoppard, particularly Pinter, is the way in which Schaffer's plays are remembered for the actors who did them. So Paul Scofield originally in Amadeus. Interestingly, a younger generation like Daniel Radcliffe. It was a pretty bold way of announcing that he was not just this bespectacled wizard on screen. So I think of Schaffer very much in relation to the actors who did his work.
Well, I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius, Sid Tepps, and as a tribute to Peter Shaffer, what else can we close with tonight but a little Mozart? Here's a little bit of the Jupiter Symphony.